The rain was coming down in sheets when billionaire Ryan Carter stepped out his black SUV, anger flashing in his eyes. Under the oak tree near the mansion gate sat his maid, Keisha Williams, a beautiful black woman in her early 30s, soaked to the skin, clutching a cheap lunchbox like it was her last meal. He shouted through the storm, "Keisha, what the hell are you doing out here?" She froze, her trembling hands hovering over her food, her dark curls stuck to her face, rain dripping down her cheeks. She looked up with quiet fear. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't want to eat inside." "Mrs. Eleanor said I shouldn't dirty the dining area." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Dirty the dining area? You work here, not live on the streets." Before she could answer, the elegant white housekeeper, Eleanor, stepped out holding an umbrella. Her tone was calm, practiced, almost rehearsed. "She shouldn't be here, sir. And it's not just that. She broke your late mother's crystal vase this afternoon." Keisha's eyes widened. "No, sir, that's not true." But Eleanor spoke over her, voice dripping with superiority. "I found her alone in the hall. The vase was in pieces. She's been careless for weeks." Ryan's face hardened. The heirloom was priceless. His mother's memory lived inside it. "You broke it after everything I said about that room?" he demanded. Tears mixed with rain on Keisha's face. "I didn't, sir. I swear I didn't." "Enough," he barked. The thunder rolled behind his voice. "Don't lie to me." Keisha flinched as he turned away. The lunchbox slipped from her hands, spilling cold rice and beans into mud. She didn't cry. She just whispered, "I'm sorry, sir." The billionaire walked off into the storm, fury masking guilt. If this already made your blood boil, hit like and subscribe right now, because stories like this are still happening, and the world needs to hear them. Back inside the mansion, Ryan poured himself a drink, trying to ignore the echo of her trembling voice. But the image of that soaked woman in the rain wouldn't leave his mind. He had believed Eleanor instantly, without question. Outside, Keisha sat beneath the tree, shivering, her bleeding hand pressed to her lap, a silent proof of innocence that no one cared to see. Note Hamesha Part NP after line Dina high early that afternoon. The Harding estate had been silent, the kind of silence only wealth can afford. The air smelled of polish and rain waiting to fall. Inside the grand hallway, the priceless crystal vase stood tall on its pedestal, a family heirloom worth more than Keisha could earn in 10 years. Keisha moved quietly through the corridor, her blue uniform neat, her dark brown skin glowing under chandelier light. She took pride in her work. Every corner she cleaned was a promise to her son back home, that she'd keep this job no matter how hard it got. Then came the sound of heels. Eleanor Harding, the white housekeeper, walked in, elegant, sharp, cold. "You missed a spot," she said, tapping the cabinet edge. Keisha turned, about to answer politely, when Eleanor's elbow brushed the pedestal. The vase teetered for half a second, then shattered against the marble floor. The sound echoed like thunder. Eleanor froze, then slowly looked up with narrowed eyes. "Oh my," she whispered, feigning shock. "What have you done?" Keisha's breath caught. "Ma'am, I didn't quiet," Eleanor hissed, her voice dropping low. "No one saw what happened. If you value your job, you'll take the blame." Keisha shook her head, panic rising. "I can't lie about this." "You!" Eleanor's eyes hardened. "Then pack your things. And remember, I can tell Mr. Carter you were caught stealing food again. You think he'll believe you over me?" The words sliced deeper than any insult. Keisha's lips trembled. She thought of her son, Jalen, just 10 years old, waiting for a paycheck to cover his asthma medicine. "I didn't do anything wrong," she whispered. Eleanor smiled coldly. "Then sit outside until I decide what to tell him. Maybe the rain will teach you obedience." By evening, the storm began. Keisha sat under the oak tree with her small meal, not out of choice but humiliation. Every drop that hit her skin carried the weight of injustice she couldn't fight. Inside, Eleanor wiped the marble clean, practicing her tone, calm, respectful, innocent, the way she'd speak when the billionaire came home. And when Ryan did, drenched and tired, she already had her story rehearsed. ready to turn a lie into truth. Note her mesh apart NP after line Dina high, the night grew heavier. Thunder rolling above the mansion like a warning. Inside his study, Ryan Carter stared at the fireplace, bourbon in hand, trying to drown the unease rising in his chest. Eleanor's story made sense, yet something about Keisha's eyes wouldn't leave his mind. They weren't the eyes of a liar. They were the eyes of someone broken for far too long. He stood by the window, watching the storm lash the garden. She was still out there, a lone figure under the oak tree, her soaked uniform clinging to her, clutching that ruined lunchbox. "Damn it," he muttered, guilt stabbing through his chest. Why didn't she just go home? Why sit there like she'd done something unforgivable? A soft knock broke the silence. It was Henry, the gardener, an older black man with rain dripping from his coat. His hand shook slightly as he held out a small USB stick wrapped in a plastic bag. "Sir," he said quietly, "before you decide anything about Miss Williams, you should see this." Ryan frowned. "What is it?" "Security footage," Henry replied, "from the East Corridor. Mrs. Eleanor doesn't know I installed a backup camera. I saw what really happened." Ryan's heartbeat quickened. "Explain." Henry took a deep breath. "She broke it, sir. The vase." Then blamed Keisha. "She's been bullying that girl for months, doubling her shifts, threatening to fire her if she spoke." I couldn't stay quiet anymore. The billionaire stared at him, the firelight flickering against his stunned face. "You're sure?" "I saw it myself, before the rain cut the feed," Henry said. "You'll see, too. It's all here." Ryan took the USB with a trembling hand. It felt heavier than gold. "Thank you, Henry," he said quietly. "That will be all." When the gardener left, the room fell silent again, except for the crackle of the flames. Ryan sat at his desk and plugged in the drive. The footage loaded, grainy but clear enough. Eleanor brushing past the pedestal, her elbow knocking the vase. The crash, the look of guilt turning instantly to calculation. Then Keisha walking in confused, only to be blamed, yelled at, and pushed outside into the rain. Ryan's hand tightened into a fist. The guilt he felt before now burned into anger, not at her, but at himself. Note her mesh apart NP after line Dina high. If this happened right in front of you, what would you do? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And if you want justice as much as I do, hit subscribe. Ryan didn't wait for morning. He stormed through the marble hallway, the storm still echoing in his mind. The footage replayed behind his eyes. Eleanor's lies, Keisha's tears, the truth he refused to see. He pressed the intercom. "Eleanor, my office. Now." Minutes later, she appeared, immaculate as always. Hair tied, uniform pressed, her face calm as a statue. "You called, sir?" Ryan didn't answer. He simply turned his laptop toward her. On the screen, Eleanor knocking the vase, then pointing at Keisha, pushing her toward the back door. The video froze. Her finger caught midair, accusing. Eleanor's composure cracked for a heartbeat. "Ah," she said softly. So the gardener installed cameras again. Ryan's voice was ice. "You framed her. You humiliated her. You lied to my face." She straightened, defiant. "She doesn't belong here. Girls like her..." "Stop right there." His tone sliced through the air. "You don't get to say that in my house." Eleanor's jaw tightened. "You're letting emotion cloud judgment. These people. Ryan snapped. "You mean the woman who works harder than anyone here? The woman you bullied for months while I looked away?" The silence between them was thick, electric. For the first time, Eleanor's voice trembled. "I've kept this house running for 16 years. And in those 16 years, Ryan cut in, you turned it into a place where good people were afraid to breathe." He stepped closer. "You're finished here. Get your things and leave before I call security." Eleanor blinked, stunned. "You would throw me out for her?" "No," he said, steady. "I'm throwing you out because I finally see what you are." She opened her mouth, but no words came. With a small, bitter laugh, she turned and walked out, heels echoing down the hallway. When she was gone, Ryan exhaled. The air in the mansion felt different, lighter somehow. He walked to the window. Outside, under the faint glow of the garden lights, Keisha still sat shivering beneath the oak. This time, he didn't hesitate. He grabbed his coat and stepped into the rain, not as her boss, but as a man trying to make something right. Node Hamesha Part NP, after lying Dina hide the rain, had softened to a quiet drizzle by the time Ryan Carter reached the oak tree. Keisha Williams looked up, startled, her dark eyes swollen from tears, her uniform still drenched, her hands trembling around that same lunchbox. He stopped a few feet away, breathing heavily, guilt etched across his face. "Keisha," he said softly. Her voice barely rose above the rain. "Yes, sir." "You're hurt." She glanced down at her palm. The dried cut still raw. "It's nothing." "I was wrong," he said. His tone, stripped of pride, felt almost human. "I watched the footage. I saw what really happened." Keisha froze. The words hit her harder than the storm. "Then you know." He nodded. "Eleanor's gone. She won't step foot in this house again." Her lips parted, trembling. "Sir, I didn't mean to." "You don't have to explain," Ryan interrupted gently. "I should be the one explaining. I believed a lie because it was easier than believing injustice could live under my own roof." A long silence followed. The rain dripped softly through the leaves above them. He took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. It swallowed her completely, but she clutched it tight, warmth she hadn't felt in weeks. "Come inside," he said. "Let me clean your hand." Inside the mansion, the fire crackled again, not cold this time, but comforting. Ryan carefully wrapped a white cloth around her palm. His hands, usually firm and controlled, now moved with quiet shame. "You have a son, don't you?" he asked suddenly. She nodded. "Jalen. He wants to be a doctor one day." Ryan tied the bandage tight. "Then let's make sure he gets that chance." Keisha's breath caught. "You don't have to, I want to," he said. "And you don't owe me anything. Just promise you'll never let anyone make you feel less than who you are again." Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. For the first time, the billionaire didn't see a maid. He saw a mother, strong, proud, and human. When she whispered, "Thank you," it wasn't for the job or the bandage. It was for being seen. Outside, the last drops of rain fell, like the sky itself was ready to forgive. Node Hamesha Part NP, after lying Dina high, the morning sun slipped gently through the mansion windows, painting the halls in gold. It had been 2 weeks since Eleanor's departure, and for the first time in years, the Harding estate breathed differently. No whispers, no fear, just quiet, steady life. Keisha Williams walked down the corridor, not in her maid's uniform, but in a modest white blouse and dark skirt. Her badge now read, House Operations Assistant. It wasn't just a title. It was proof that justice could still live inside these walls. As she entered the kitchen, the younger staff straightened up. "Morning, Miss Keisha," said Carla, the new housemaid, with a bright smile. Keisha returned it warmly. "Good morning, Carla. How's inventory coming along?" "Better," she said. "Feels safer here now." Keisha nodded, making a note on her clipboard. That's how it should have always been. From the study doorway, Ryan Carter watched quietly. The same man who once barked orders now observing a woman rebuild what he nearly destroyed. When Keisha noticed him, she smiled. "Everything's back in order, sir." "Ryan," he corrected gently. "You can call me Ryan now." She hesitated, then said softly, "All right, Ryan." He stepped forward. "I've been reviewing everyone's schedules. Janet's been working double shifts again. She refuses to rest," Keisha replied. "Says she's afraid someone might replace her." Ryan shook his head. "No one's losing their job for being loyal. I'll make sure of it." They walked together through the main hall. For the first time, the silence didn't feel cold. It felt earned. Ryan stopped near the grand staircase. "You know, I used to think running this house meant controlling everything." Keisha looked up at him. "And now I know leadership means listening." Later that afternoon, a few wealthy guests visited the estate. Investors from New York. One of them, a polished woman in pearls, eyed Keisha curiously. "She's staff?" she whispered to Ryan. He smiled calmly. She's the reason this place still stands." The woman blinked, unsure what to say. As the guests left, Keisha exhaled quietly. "You didn't have to defend me." Ryan replied, "I wasn't defending you, Keisha. I was telling the truth." The same oak tree outside swayed in the wind, no longer a place of punishment, but a symbol of what had changed. And this time, Keisha didn't look at it with pain, only pride. Node Hamesha Part NP after line Dinahai. The next morning, the world outside the mansion wasn't quiet anymore. A newspaper headline sat waiting at the front gate, bold and bitter. "Billionaire promotes former maid, scandal or sympathy?" Keisha Williams froze when she saw her name printed across the page. The photo below showed her walking out of the estate, confident, head high, unaware that someone had captured her strength like a controversy. She took a deep breath, folded the paper, and walked straight to Ryan Carter's office. He was already there, pacing, phone in hand. "They're calling it favoritism," he said grimly. "They're questioning your position and mine." Keisha's voice stayed calm. "They don't care about truth, Ryan. They care about stories that sell." He looked at her, guilt and anger mixing. "Then we'll give him the real one." That afternoon, the Harding estate gates opened to reporters for the first time. Cameras clicked, voices shouted questions, but Ryan stood beside Keisha. Not in front of her, not behind her, beside her. When the microphones turned their way, he spoke first. "This house once stood on silence. Today it stands on truth. Miss Williams was wronged under my roof, and instead of firing her, I listened, because justice isn't a favor, it's a responsibility." He looked at her, nodding gently. "Keisha," she stepped forward, the cameras reflecting in her eyes. "You don't have to believe in me," she said, her voice steady, "but believe in people like me, the ones who work quietly, who endure, who forgive, because when you ignore them, you ignore the foundation you're standing on." The crowd fell silent. No one expected dignity to sound that powerful. By evening, the video had gone viral. Comments poured in from across the US, Canada, and the UK. People wrote, "I see her. This is real leadership. Respect to both of them." Later that night, Ryan and Keisha stood once again beneath the oak tree, no longer soaked by rain, but bathed in moonlight. "This place feels different," he said. "It's not the place," she replied. "It's the people inside it." Ryan smiled faintly. "You changed this house, Keisha." She shook her head. "No, Ryan, we changed it together." The wind moved to the branches above them. Not like a storm this time, but like a song finally finding its peace. If you believe this should never happen again, share this now. And to my USA, UK, and Canadian viewers, your voice is power. Use it